Welcome to South Beach Sessions. I'm looking forward to this one, and they paired this man with me for a reason, because he'll crack open and he'll give you the vulnerability and the shame, and you know that the grief eater loves those things. Andrew Zimmern is an award-winning host and television host and chef. I don't know what it means to win the James Beard Award. You've done it multiple times, but it makes you around food one of the best America has to offer. Thank you for being with us, but the reason that I wanted to talk to you is for all the interesting parts in your journey. It begins somewhere with radio, with a love of radio, with understanding where it is that radio connects with people, and you've been allowed to reveal your personality to people in a way that has been, I imagine, life-affirming. But thank you for being on with us.
No. I love it. I mean, this is these are the conversations that I love, and I love what you do. So, yeah, let's dive in.
You're in the middle of this Food and Wine Festival is one of the best things Miami does. Miami doesn't do things consistently well, and you've seen it grow. So this is a hugely busy time for you. Your relationship with food, your relationship with this city, your relationship with this festival is what?
Well, 24 years ago, Lee Schrager had the idea, along with Southern Glazer Wine and Spirits, to throw a little party on the beach, have some chefs come down and cook some food, raise some money for Florida International University's Chaplin School of Hospitality, and it's taken off from there. It's now, 100,000+ people descending on, essentially South Beach, although there are events all the way down to the jump-off spot to the Keys and all the way up to West Palm. And it has become a massive, really Wednesday to Monday scene, so much so that there are giant-sized ticketed events that other people throw because they know so many people are in town, like Art Basel, like so many, or Basel, I guess as we're supposed to call it.
Bacchanalia is what it is.
Bacchanalia.
It's everyone coming to South Florida and
right.
having sex with food and just humping our region for a few days and then leaving. On airplanes filled with indigestion and gas.
Yes. And free samples of things.
Yes, excellent.
It has become really something that's quite incredible, and raised, $40 million for this hospitality school, which is of vital importance because of the intersection of, societal tentpoles at which chefs and people in the hospitality industry sit, from health and wellness to immigration to national security, hunger, waste, climate crisis.
I want to talk to you about the politics of food, and I want to talk to you about your story and all of these things, because this is not what you're doing here. Here, this is a party, right?
Oh, it is fun entertainment. I'm co-hosting the closing party, something that I've done for, the last 15 of the 20 years that I've been down here. And, obviously the regular demos and dinners and the other things that I've been doing every day on the hamster wheel of excess that I've been, treading.
That's a great phrase. But I feel like I've been on that all my life. The hamster wheel of excess.
Yes. Because I can't say the word no. We were saying that before we came in here. Once I'm coming down to a place, folks look at me and they say, "Hey, you're here. Would you? Could you?" And I'm like, absolutely. Of course I can. What else am I going to do?
Forgive me for interrupting you, but I would imagine that you, just viewed from afar, that you are, this is presumptuous of me, a generally happy person, because you can't believe your good fortune that people keep grabbing you by the ear and say, "Will you please put your face and voice next to my food, my party?" Given where you've been in your life, given that you did not have a home for a year, for you to find yourself, like, it must feel like a version of heaven on earth. Just the gratitude of it. I'm not even talking about the life. I'm talking about the way you feel.
Gratitude is how I run my life, and not to words matter. You are a wordsmith, and when we talk about not having a home for a year, that is homelessness, right? And it's not food insecurity, it's hunger. And I've experienced both those things in my life. I've been, a homeless street junkie, user of people, taker of things. I've been in jail and prison. I've done some horrible, horrible things in my life. And then, had a complete 180 flip 33 plus years ago, and my life changed all for the better. And while life still happens, I mean, life is fired at us at point blank range, right? We can't predict when the dog is going to run away, or when the relationship's going to end, or when the job changes, or the parent dies, or the child gets sick, or we get sick. The big sort of things in life that tend to be, hinge events. However, in general, the thing that has happened to me has been placed in a position where I can operate best when I'm in a state of being grateful all the time, and I'm reminded of it all the time face to face because I'm very public with my story, and that's been sort of the key to my own happiness. If I wasn't public with my story, I wouldn't be getting the empathy back. I wouldn't have to talk about it all the time, and having to talk about it all the time. And when I say all the time, I mean in my public life, it is the greatest gift because it's what keeps me sober. It's what keeps me healthy, happy, serene. When I am not those things, it is usually because of a problem of my own making that put me in a position to be hurt.
Are you articulating there that you've been rewarded for being public with your shame?
Incredibly.
And that was a choice to go from hiding. You were hiding, and
1,000%.
And that choice was scary?
1,000%.
To tell people nakedly, this is what addiction was for me.
Correct. And I was in a position where there was an element about it that was, as my spiritual guru was in my 12-step program described it to me, that was a form of service work, right? Because if I'm placed in this world where I was placed in this world where I started to have a platform, and I had to make a decision about how public I was going to be with this. And the more that I kept it away from people, the more not only was it secret keeping for me because I wasn't living an honest and open life, but I was missing out on the opportunity to help another person who could look at me, because on the outside I looked bright and shiny. And if they heard that I was a suicide survivor, maybe they would say, oh my gosh, so what happened? I mean, if that was 33 years ago and this guy looks pretty happy and like he has a pretty nice life, and then they hear from me that I am pretty happy and I have a pretty nice life, then I get to tell them what happened and what that transformational moment was for me. Maybe it helps another person. And what I have found, especially when I do things like this and I have conversations about my life with another human being in a public way, right? Listeners we will change someone's life, probably many, many people's lives just by having this conversation. I get stopped every single day by someone who thanks me because of something I said that helped them,
it's your new addiction, right? To feed this particular thing and have these transformational moments daily, I would imagine.
Well, you do start to benefit from it in such a regular way that it is, like a lab mouse hitting that little dropper in the cage that, rewards them in some way, whether it's with, sugar water or whatever. Yeah, I mean,
but that's not a placebo.
I'm an addictive person.
But that's not a placebo to connect with a human being in a way that makes you feel grateful and have gratitude for the person coming and willing to share the story.
100%.
To be awed by you. Why would this person take an interest in me?
100%. 100%.
You've traded addictions, and this is a much healthier
it's a swap,
one.
100%, because I have not, and look. Addiction swapping, which is something as a recovering alcoholic and drug addict, I do tell newcomers, we have to slow our lives down so we are not addiction swapping. Alcoholism and drug addiction will kill you faster than workaholism, but workaholism will kill your relationships, right? So you better tread lightly on those addiction swapping. You don't want to start picking up, candy and cigarettes and putting down one thing and balloon up and get really sick. So I tell people, what was told to me when I showed up, which was slow it down. And I spent the first 4 or 5 years in slow mode. And then as my life started to build back up, I was able to have some perspective on the things that I was starting to do on a more regular basis. So I could meter my workaholism. I could meter out I didn't want to be, number one, a one-trick pony. I also it would be very boring for me personally to live a life where I was just preaching all the time. But selectively, absolutely, yes. I am addicted to the concept of gratitude. The way I get that way is by sharing my story, and doing service work puts life in perspective for me. And service work saved my life.
I want to get into that, but take us back to where it is that your life was that you arrive in 1990 to being evicted from an apartment, and before that, I don't know what your family situation was that would allow you to be dabbling in drug use too early for most kids.
I mean, the really short story is, family of a good family, well off, private school, summer home. I mean, 1%ers for sure. At a very early age, I already had the addictive personality, and the way that manifested itself was in extreme selfishness and extreme selfish behavior. Everything was about me. Take. And, when you're 10, being a user of people and a taker of things looks differently. It's, spoiled brat. Okay, he's amusing, nice. Can he be tender and real at times? Absolutely. But mostly he's acting out of self, right?
But loving home, disciplined home,
loving home, parents trying their best. I mean, kids don't come with instruction manuals. I'm well aware of that as a parent. But yeah, my parents tried the best they could. Did they have issues that were unresolved? I mean, one of the things that I love about this new sort of mental health and wellness moment that we seem to be having in this culture, with so many people talking about it, and it telling folks it's okay to not be okay, is that we're going to end some of the generational trauma that young people in my generation were victims of, for sure, because our parents were told to stuff that bad feeling down.
But when I ask you,
that's great.
Okay, but when I ask you loving home, and again, I'm not being presumptuous. They're doing their best, and you're meeting them with the forgiveness of adulthood and all the things that you've learned that makes you happier to let it go because you don't want to resent them for the mistakes they made.
1,000%.
But where they made the mistakes around, I don't know how much discipline was in your home and how it is that you came. Had you arrived at your teens yet when you're using?
Yes, I did. You're very insightful. The term discipline is really, really interesting. There is a balance of affection and direction that I think we try to use with our kids. I got very little direction and a ton of affection, which is great. You want to be loved and feel loved, but without direction, we can wander aimlessly and get into a lot of trouble. And if we are already predisposed to enjoy that trouble, some people get into trouble. They're like, oh my God, that was so uncomfortable. I don't want to go near that again. I call it the tequila syndrome. They get drunk on sweet, bad margaritas at some point, and they're like, I'm never touching tequila again, right? And I know adults like that. It's just like, nope, had a bad night with tequila once in high school or college, don't do it. And I find it fascinating because this is, in a way, sort of describing how normies are to people like me who are addicts and alcoholics. I never would describe a bad experience on drugs and alcohol, because that was my wubby, that was my solution to things. And once I found, I had some situations in my life that I didn't want to have my brain be percolating on. My mother got sick, my parents had divorced, I was nervous about high school, and I knew what would make me not feel that way was smoking weed and drinking. And very quickly, those two things did not scratch the itch enough. And so then it became pills and cocaine added into the mix. And then we added heroin into the mix and hallucinogenics and on and on and on. And by the time I got to college, I was a full-blown addict and alcoholic of immense proportions. and actually had my first intake at a mental health center when I was 18 years old up in Poughkeepsie, New York. I went to Vassar College, and they told me that I was chronic on the Jellinek scale, which is how they measure alcoholism and addiction. Relatively quick 20-question test, and you answer yes to all those things, and it's like, wow, you're at the full end of the scale at 18 years old. But you can't tell an 18-year-old that their path is going to lead to, jails, institutions, and death. Because at 18, we all think we're Superman, right? So I just kept going. And gradually over the course of the next 12 years until the time I was 30 and I got clean, the elevator just kept going down through descending levels of Dante's circles of hell. I mean, it was just really, really awful. Now, looking back on it, I can see that. When you're in it, you don't see it as anything as a situation to quote unquote manage. You feel like you're in a small boat in an ocean with waves bigger than you can't see over the next waves. You're just dealing with the wave that's in front of you without a long-term plan. It eventually led me to losing my home, being evicted. And by the way, I was enjoying a very successful career in New York City before my drugs and alcohol absolutely made me unemployable, which is about a year and a half before I went homeless. And I wound up, squatting a building in Lower Manhattan, just casements in the windows, in the space where windows would be, pirating electricity from the brownstone 2 or 3 over from the one that we were squatting. And, my biggest issue was stealing Comet Cleanser to sprinkle around the dirty pile of clothes I passed out on every night so the rats and roaches wouldn't crawl all over me. I would steal purses to survive. I would roll bums in alleys for bottles they had. I would, roll rich guys coming out of nightclubs downtown, one in particular that was right by a very choice alley for it, because I knew that those people would have, cash and credit cards, and I would just wait across the street for someone who was stumbling and push them down on the ground and take their wallet. And it was, that's how I lived day to day. And I saw nothing wrong with it. I was just trying to survive. Ultimately, realizing deep inside that I was losing this game of life. And rather than work to get out of the hole that I was in, I wanted to quit, right? And the longer I dwelled on that, quit life. The longer that I dwelled on that, the more that turned into suicidal ideation. Eventually, I acted on it. I woke up one day in a flop house hotel that I had gone into with a fistful of barbiturates and a couple bottles of, warm Popov vodka, and I chugged them all. And I woke up and I wasn't dead. And apparently, I'd been out for a couple of days. And my intention was not to wake up. And I don't know why. I mean, I took enough barbiturates to kill someone twice my size. I don't know why I survived that day, but I did. And I picked up the phone and I did something that I had never done my whole life, that everybody had told me was sort of the key to growing as a human being. And that was to look someone in the eye and say, I don't know how to do that. Can you show me? Basically asking for help, right? I'd never done that in school, with parents, with coaches, with anyone in my life. All the people who were there to help you as you grow up. I never took advantage of that at all.
You were always retreating deeper and deeper into yourself.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because you couldn't tell me anything about me. I knew more than you. Everything was self. I was better. And not only did I reject your opinions and your advice and any wisdom, and I was a terrible listener, but I also blamed you for all the problems that I had. You got the pretty girl. You got the better grades. You stole the attention of this group of friends. Whatever it was, other people were the problem. It was always me not getting things at the party as opposed to what I was bringing to it.
The opposite of what you have now learned and lived in adulthood, where you're walking around with gratitude, you're walking around with an assortment of negative energies and just chasing the next high because you're addicted. I've got a number of questions about what you just said, but when you talk about the household, and I wouldn't have had access to getting that kind of addicted to anything without people noticing before it got. This doesn't mean that my parents could have done anything, but I was just too afraid of disappointing them that maybe I would have also gotten grabbed, but people would have noticed very early on. So that's what I'm asking you. How?
No one noticed because there was no direction. I had a sick mother who was basically invalided by a surgery in a hospital gone wrong, and a father who was living in an apartment downtown far away. I've learned today that my father, who's my hero, ultimate hero in life, was also the person who abandoned me into that situation with my mother, which is okay for me to say today. It took me 20 years in sobriety to even realize that there was an abandonment in my life by him. And because I would never do that to my own kid. And it were the situation reversed. And it was and looking back on that home situation, 14 years old, self-will run riot, it would be the best way to describe what was going on in my head and my behaviors. And without supervision, horrific things develop. So there was that in very large amounts.
And you're lost out to sea at what age with the drugs? 14, 15?
14.
Okay, so your high school experience involves how functionally were you learning?
Oh, very well. A lot of addiction and alcoholism is characterized by a duality of lives, right? So on one hand, I was sinking further and further into my addiction and alcoholism and the behaviors that are associated with it, which are just as destructive. On the other hand, 9 to 5, I am, rock starring it. Great grades, president of my senior class, doing all the right moves in all the right groups, doing all the right things. And by the way, a lot of really fun, great stuff was happening to me in high school. But my 5 to 9, so to speak, was a lot of delinquent behavior, things I'm not proud of, a lot of drugs and alcohol use. And what would have happened if I wasn't? Would I have even been more high achieving? Yeah, I would imagine so. But, I did well. I got into a good college, and I continued that duality all the way up until I couldn't support it anymore, which was about a year and a half before that eviction.
So tell me about where it is that the drugs, because you're a conqueror, right? You are high achieving. You are, I imagine you were at the time almost totally controlled by your mind, and then the drugs allow you to not pay attention to the revving of your mind.
That's right.
And so you're talking about two totally different lives, but functional.
Functional.
Until the drug problem caves in everything else.
It was actually the alcohol problem. And I mean that really specifically. And it's why I think alcohol, and I've said this a lot very publicly, I think alcohol is more dangerous than any drug I've ever if alcohol was invented today, you wouldn't be able to buy it in stores. It's so dangerous. It would test out so dangerously at the FDA. It just wouldn't. It would be classified as heroin is classified. You just can't get it. I quit drugs about 3 years before I sobered up. About 18 months before the complete instability and the homelessness and all the rest of that. And it accelerated my downward spiral. I was completely uncontrollable. My life was completely unmanageable on alcohol. On drugs, I was able to somewhat function, mostly because I was using a combination of uppers and downers to work. I could show up. I could pop a pill and be alert, quote unquote. And I could show up for things. When I went solely on alcohol, My life just absolutely hurtled out of control. 4 days, 5 days of blackout that I would awaken from, and look around and say, where am I? I mean, it was really, 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 really bad. And the worst kind of, self-loathing. I mean, alcohol brought out the absolute worst in me. And when I was focused solely on that and drinking around the clock, I was completely unable to function physically, mentally. Obviously, there was no spiritual life, no inwardly directed moral set of values. And that's when things got really, really, really bad.
Okay, you've said, though, when things got really, really, really bad, and I don't know how much shame you have that's unexplored, because I've heard you're very revelatory with the worst of these details. And in the storytelling, you remember which are the ones that'll land most unpleasantly.
Sure.
So I don't even know. Is there anything for you here that hasn't been shared? Like, are there shames that are a bridge too far for you?
No. I have shared privately in recovery rooms, in certain environments, the litany of the worst. And I have no desire to, get into glorifying that behavior by listing all of it out. But I was not aware that I did it. But it's so fascinating that you mentioned this, because somebody asked me about this at dinner last night. I did an interview for a group called Think that creates videos for mental health and wellness support for people. And they came and interviewed me, and I told them a story that wound up being in this cut. They created a 7-minute video. We're going to put it up on my website and on my YouTube, I think, next week. I think folks can see it. It's think.com or think.org. I really should know that. But it's quite a compelling piece that they put together. They invested a lot of money in this. The animation alone in it had to cost a fortune. It's a really well done 7-minute condensed version of my story. And in it, I talked about jerking a guy off in an alley for money when I was when I needed money for heroin. And I realized that I had never come out publicly before. I think the way the media works, more people will probably know that now that I'm talking to you about it than will ever see it on Think. So when you talked earlier about the value of sharing these details, it is I'm sure there are people out there who are just absolutely horrified listening to that. But I know there are also men out there and women who will listen to that and say, yeah, I did that too, for some, or a version of that. That kind of behavior where you will cross every moral line to get to prioritize your using is that jumping off place that we as alcoholics and drug addicts in recovery, when we look back, we say, wow, that was another line that I crossed. Oh, another year later, that was another line that I crossed. And in fact, it was those behaviors that year that made me think, all right, drugs bad, booze legal, I'll just do that. And it wound up, as I said, accelerating my downfall.
It's so interesting, though, for you to explore rock bottom of rock bottom. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's anything worse than the shame of the loss of dignity that makes suicide a solution.
Correct.
To stop the pain.
That's it.
That suicide is the answer to my problems, because I've quit on, I can't navigate my problems. There are too many of them. I am hopeless.
It's overwhelming. And, where did you get the sensitivity to that? Because most people aren't sensitive to that.
To which part? The loss of dignity, the shame,
all of that. It's not yes. I mean, could you absorb that intellectually? I mean, you're very empathetic.
I'm an empath.
But
yeah, I'm an empath. So and I also speak my feelings more than feel them for the entirety of my life.
Sure.
So my curiosity is profound around people who are willing to tell you what they've learned from the darkest parts of their past, because they shape you and they make it so that someone can walk around in life grateful for the human experience. As age sets in and thoughts of mortality, you get to live a life that is more complete because it has the sharing of this story in it,
1,000%,
and the human connection that allows you. You run all your businesses. The thing that you said, one of the things that you said that landed on me hard, though, as somebody who is trying to get more and more access to his feelings, is what all of this does to relationships. Because even now, in whatever it is that you're sharing of your life with others, your ambition and your workaholic imbalances must make it very hard to still take care of others in relationships.
It is. Every year I get better. It was a process to identify it. It was a process, it was a sequence in my life. There was the first couple years that I was, clean. I mean, before real sobriety kind of set in. My life was very simple. I worked from 9 to 5. I went to meetings. I went home. I went to bed. There was no workaholism. There were also no relationships. There were also no bills coming to the house. So, life. I wasn't in the complete flow of life. The more I inserted myself into the complete flow of life and became successful because I didn't have the drugs and alcohol to interfere, and because I had learned a different way of living and a different platform on which, physical platform, literal platform on which to predicate my life, things start to get good, and you start to realize that, sobriety is not a switch that's on off. It's a dimmer. It slides. The room gets brighter and dark. And many times during the day, there's not on or off. Life has got a ton of gray. And so whenever I was confronted with a problem or something, if I didn't want to think about it as a chef in a restaurant at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years clean, which is what I was doing for 7 years in Minnesota, I was a chef and partner in a very small restaurant group as I was kind of rebuilding my life. I could dive into work. Restaurants are perfectly day-to-day. Restaurant work is perfectly suited for that if you're part of the leadership team, because you can find an excuse to be there early before everyone shows up and leave late after most people have gone and justify it, right? Oh, this is a job that you have to devote yourself 100% to. Devote yourself 100% to anything, and there's no room for the rest of what life has to offer. And the older you get, you mentioned mortality. I think it's more about realizing, and I think it's probably every year I have a different message for people. And I've realized, kind of looking back at the last couple of months, my message for people does have a lot to do with my mortality, which is, what do you want to spend your time on? Because when I die, which, knock on wood, won't be for a long, long, long time, people will speak nicely of me, I hope, assuming that I die clean and I continue on the path that I'm on. I'm people will say nice things about me when I'm gone. My possessions, will get divided up. My, pictures will be on people's walls. I'll be remembered fondly for a while until I'm not remembered at all, which is really, and I'm talking about on a regular basis. You will gradually fade from people's consciousness, and at the end of the day, how do I want to spend my time? Because accumulating the things is not going to do me any good when I'm gone. I need to be enjoying experiences now. So hanging out and taking a walk with my kid has probably taken on 20 times the importance today than it did a year ago. I mean, literally a year ago, because those are the things that I want to be doing more of while I'm still ambulatory and can take a walk.
Well, I deflected your question, and in deflecting it and realizing that I deflected it and doing what I do, I will better be able to answer your question now that you asked me about how it is or why it is I get interested in people. It is an excellent way to avoid intimacy if you ask people about themselves, because people are delighted to talk about themselves. And I am genuinely curious, and that has been rewarded all my life in the reporting of details that make for my career, and I get a lot of my identity from my career, and it's how you become a workaholic. Like, you can hide
Likewise.
in all of those details. I realized some of that while at my brother's deathbed, right? Because you have to understand. So you grow up in a family of exiles. It's just a small community of fear. It's one of the things people don't understand that's happening right now in America, where all the divisions are. So your family is this big, and the way to get out of a family this big is to just work toward freedom, and that'll get you all the things you want in life. And my brother did have many of the things through his art, but burned through artistic, physical paint in a way that, like, in just burning through his creative arts, feeding some of the selfishness, not paying attention to the places where you hide and become a workaholic, like, just burnt like a comet through his life. And in being next to him there, and having my old parents come over and them having procedures at a nearby place, like the frailty of life lapping on your shoulders when you're sitting at a bench with your dad and being like, was it worth it? Was it all worth it? Like, like you learn about what matters in life, but it doesn't
100%.
stop me from wanting to achieve. It doesn't stop me from getting the fulfillment that comes from having meaningful conversations that I can profit off of.
Sure.
Like, because this
It's how you support your family. It's how you take care of yourself emotionally and mentally. I mean, there are a lot of healthy things about that. I mean, it's I always describe it to young men and women that I mentor, especially in the recovery space, that it's we have all these metaphors for it. Stay in the center of the boat, don't get near the edges. It's the same thing as driving down the center of the road. Stay as close to the center line of the highway. Don't start bouncing off the guardrails, right, in life. And it's difficult because sometimes life forces you to bounce off. Sometimes that guardrail comes towards you. So it does become challenging. But we do seek out, for some reason, as human beings, there is an element of self-sabotage in all of us, right? It's just magnified, I think, in some of us.
What would you say you've learned through I like these things to be a platform. It's obviously a broad question, but if you could point to one thing that ends with the most enlightened you that sits in front of us right now through everything he's lived and experienced, what do you feel is the highest form of learning that you've done?
Oh, wow. What a great question. Well, if I had to pick one concept that was specific but touched the 3, 4, or 5 biggest things that are guideposts for me, because it's very hard to pick. We don't look at one star and say, I'm going to navigate towards that. Stars are too far away. We need to have a cluster of stars. It's a grouping. I think it's learning to be the dog. My goal in life every day when I get up is more and more to try to be the dog. The dog is pure empathy. Pure empathy. I mean, even Hitler had a dog. Think of the worst person they have a dog. That person comes home, they sit on the couch, the dog jumps up in their lap and puts their head down and is just with that person. That's what dogs are. They're pure empathy. And I have learned that I don't have to fix your problems. I don't have to judge you. I don't have to do anything in life but just be with you. And if I am really just with you, I mean, there's that beautiful moment in the movie Big Night, Stanley Tucci is and Tony Shalhoub are in that kitchen, and Tony Shalhoub just makes scrambled eggs for them. All their plans have gone awry. They're going to lose everything, but you kind of are left with the feeling that they won't. They're going to figure a way out of this because they're finally just with each other. The movie ends with the two of them in silence eating scrambled eggs and toast, right, in that movie. And there is an element of being the dog there that is so beautiful. And in that piece of film sort of capsulizes everything that I'm talking about. But if you can just be the dog with someone, you have incredible access and incredible ways to touch each other in relationship. And I've got a really short example for you. You're in a relationship. Your significant other that you live with comes home, walks in the door, hot. I mean, red hot, anger, swearing, slamming doors, throwing bags. I lost my phone. The dog ran away. I think I'm going to get fired. My new boss is a jerk. And
there's a lot happening.
And I turn to that person and I say, well, did you ask the security guard at work if they found your phone? And the city's like, up yours. I'm an adult. I don't need you to solve my problem. Of course I taught the security guard. I'm just venting. I need my best friend, Right. Screw you. You are not connecting as human beings. If that person comes in and does the same thing and I say, sit down, and I go into the kitchen and I get a glass of water, I put it down, and I turn to them, I said, that sounds awful. What else happened? And I just and they're like, oh, well, and I talked to security, I did this, did that. Right. And it's like, thank you for listening. Thank you for just being there for me. We see examples in space for it all the time to be the dog. We just don't, we want to, I call it operationalizing before co-regulating. Right? You have to co-regulate with someone first and then operationalize. If I tell you what to do before we're co-regulated, my advice is meaningless.
Well, I would say, I don't know if I think I can be generalized about this, but I know I've lived it. The idea that if I don't live in my feelings and I'm male and not self-aware about where it is that I'm male, I have blind spots about maleness, then of course I'm going to lapse into just problem solving or how do I fix this as opposed to just feeling whatever needs to be felt. All you're articulating about what you've learned through your life's journeys is human connection. Really value it. Just really treat it as a treasure. Any opportunity you get to have human connection.
By the way, that human connection is the essence of my storytelling, and it is the thing that I hear back the most from fans about my TV work, right? I mean, very few people relatively taste my food, buy my products, do the other things that I do, but in groups of millions of people, they see my weekly TV work that I put out now, and, a very large number of people collectively have seen the 8 or 9 TV shows that are up on the
You make
HBO
a lot of
Max.
content. You make a lot out of you have learned through radio, through storytelling, through the connection points that allow you to tell someone how many different ways they can arrive home angry and not connect with their other. You have learned the art of connecting with human beings. It's your craft.
Yes, and on television, that is what people, when they say, oh, you're so respectful to other people, or I can go with you anywhere on that journey, or I will watch any piece of content that you put out, whether it's talking through a recipe because of the story that I tell that goes along with it, or whether it's a 6-hour docuseries on MSNBC like What's Eating America, or even stuff that I produce, the Hope in the Water, the PBS series that we made, docuseries that came out last summer, is a great example of that. I'm not in it, but as the owner of the company that made the series, it is infused with our DNA because the people who I work with, who are my colleagues in that business, they are phenomenal carriers of the messages that we try to weave. And it is such an interesting thing to have that spat back at you by friends and fans alike, where inside I'm thinking to myself, okay, that was good. I was able to connect that way with people. People don't, we don't have it written out in a lower third or a graphic that crawls across the bottom of the screen. But I've written about this and talked about this a lot. It's like, food is good. Food with a story is better. Food with a story that you haven't heard about is better than that. But food with a story you haven't heard about that you can relate to is the best of all. And that was Bizarre Foods. It was Delicious Destinations. It was Zimmern List. Some of my other work that isn't necessarily always about food is, because we've stretched a little bit at our production company. The company itself produces a lot of different types of shows, and not just in the food space. But with the stuff that I do, it's not always in the food space.
No, but you're a mercenary merchant about understanding that you can tell. I've learned this. Mm-hmm. I can tell all the stories through sports. You can tell all the stories through
100%.
food.
I can do it through hardware. And so could you. You either have that storytelling gene or you don't. You've just chosen the world of sports and competition. Without breaking down everything that you do, what I love about sports, because I'm a sports geek, it's how I discovered, your show years and years and years ago. And we talked about this a little bit, or hinted at it, both on and off air when I did your that other show with you a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, The Daily Show.
It is. I love sports because you can get every itch scratched. You can tell every kind of story through it. The human drama in sport is great. The human drama in our food world is great. Because I can talk about international relations, national international security, voter suppression, climate crisis. Every story that I want to tell, I can tell through food. Food is my tool. Sports is your tool, but we tell the same kinds of stories.
It's the same stuff.
I was watching, I follow so many different sports things on my phone, and now my phone knows what I like. All the AI stuff that's integrated into these social media platforms and on our devices. So I turn on my laptop or my phone, and it's throwing stuff at me that I love, which for an addict, I can sit there for hours watching, the right kind of little videos. And then I yell at my kid for spending 5 minutes on his phone. But that's great. I saw last night that someone was counting down like greatest moment in sports. And what came in at number 2 was the Korean Winter Olympics, the cross-country ski race, where we had never been on the podium in cross-country skiing. It was Sweden, Norway, Sweden, Norway, Sweden, Norway, Finland, 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 Sweden, Norway, Finland, and which is great if you love herring, which I do. But, U.S. had never done it. And what was her name? Diggins, the young who wound up getting the gold medal. And she was third by like 10 yards over the last, quarter mile. And you just watch her digging deep. And it's that famous picture where she's sticking her foot out, like stretching, doing a split to get her tip of her ski across the line, and squeaks out the gold, and then collapses, literally collapses, having spent every ounce of energy. And I hadn't seen it in years. And it's a little 35, 40-second clip of the end of that race at night. And you can see that the Scandinavian skiers are kind of coasting to victory at one point, and she has to physically get up this little hill and then physically catch up getting down, and you're just like, there's no way she's going to do this, and she does. And you could talk about everything about life in that moment. Everything. The same way that if you serve me a bowl of soup, I can tell you everything about that culture, and we can talk about our food system in America. If you serve me a bowl of minestrone, I'll break it down for you that way.
It is one of the many things that makes you an artist in the culinary world. What do you remember? Because Bourdain was happening at about this time. But what do you remember about November of 2006? That is when the pilot episode of the first of 140 episodes of Bizarre Foods, that day, what do you remember about it airing, the pilot?
Oh, my gosh. Disaster. it's very funny, and my pride always talks about this. The network, in an effort to promote other seasons of Bizarre Foods, would call them different things. So we made 140 episodes of Bizarre Foods, but we made 40 episodes of Bizarre World that was the same show. We made 80, 90 episodes of Bizarre Foods America, which is just the domestic stuff, because you want the press to report on it. There's nothing new about a new season of season 8 of Bizarre Foods. There's nothing new there to get PR and marketing out of and any earned media. So we would call it something different, which is something I always have to clarify for myself, because I have to remember how privileged. It doesn't come from a place of ego. It's just that there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of that show, and 400 episodes of Delicious Destination, something ridiculous. And that's just my first 2 shows, right? When the very first show came out, it was Morocco aired. The first 3 were Morocco, Spain, Ecuador. And I was so proud. And I was like, I can't believe I'm on TV. And by the way, the network only bought the first 10 episodes, right? And you're just so lucky to get there. And so few people get to that point. Even fewer get a second season, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. To be doing what we do for as long as we've done it is super rarefied air, right? And I just remember being overwhelmed with happiness, but also overwhelmed with this feeling of, please let me do more of these. The joy, the personal satisfaction, the adventure of traveling. I mean, the healthy selfishness part of it. Oh my gosh, I'm doing things on someone else's dime that only television can.
This is
give
the
you
dream
access
for you.
to.
This is the height of what all of your addictions could manifest to produce.
And I had no idea, except through looking back on it, that actually 25 years later, when I made What's Eating America, I was like, oh no, that's the apex. Right? I mean, the goalposts keep moving, right? If I had been satisfied with stopping at the first season of Bizarre Foods and just said, you know something, I've reached my dream. I'm putting, it's like, knives down. That's it. The buzzer has gone off. I would have undersold myself. But the next week, what's really, really, really interesting is how lucky we get in life, because the next week the show rated exactly the same number, which was a very small number. Very few people watched the first episode of Bizarre Foods. Very few people watched the second episode of Bizarre Foods. What networks look at is episode number 3. If it hasn't caught fire by then, they're not going to buy a second season. Especially in the unscripted lifestyle space, which is the space that I occupy. And so week 3, we had a lot riding on it. And the number came in. It aired that third Monday of the season. We did not get a great number. It was a few percentage points lower, ratings points lower than weeks 1 and 2, which I think were the same, identical numbers. And that means the audience is not coming back. It means you're not growing audience. It is the episodic number they look at. And all I'm thinking is, well, I got that first year. I'm going to have to think about what the next show I want to sell is. If I want to keep doing this, what else would I want to do? How do I take this first season and get a book deal? I mean, all that stuff is going through my mind. Phone rings Wednesday morning. It's the Jay Leno show, Booker from the Jay Leno show, and says, we saw this clip that was sent around of you in episode 3 getting spat on, lit on fire, having your whole body break out in hives because you're beaten with these poisonous bushes. They were beating live guinea pigs against your chest until the guinea pigs died, hitting you so hard with a live animal. In this shaman's, basically a brujera, an exorcist, exorcised demons from me in a small little town called Otavalo in Ecuador. And we put it in the show, and I had actually made that scene happen. It was me, a producer, and her boyfriend, later husband.
Great television, indisputably great television.
Yeah.
You know it when you're making
100%.
it, and now Jay Leno knows it, and soon America shall
and
too.
And then Friday, I go on the Leno show. We weren't supposed to be shooting that. Everyone was on lunch break. I'm walking around. I'm curious. I go in. I realize I can pay this guy $5. He'll perform an exorcism on me. I'm like, Shannon, Mike, let's shoot this. They said, okay, begrudgingly at first, and then way into it. And we stuck with this for a couple of hours and skipped what we were supposed to shoot that afternoon. A year and a half later, the Leno show calls me because they see it. And that Friday night, I'm on the Tonight Show. And you get that. And as someone who grew up watching Johnny Carson, I'm just waiting to hear the words, oh, my God, you're fantastic. We've run out of time. Will you come back? And Jay says that to me. And I just was like, oh, my God. And I had a sense. I really did have a sense because I'd grown up with the Carson show and I had watched the Jay Leno show a lot, as America did back in those days. Oh, my God. I said, something's going to change. The next week, the ratings numbers went through the roof. Tony's book came out that week, and they had us on back-to-back nights. So you could settle in on Travel Channel, and there was a 2-hour block, later a 3-hour block with our reruns, alternating shows, and then double stack our reruns. You had 4 hours of Zimmern and Bourdain, and it was... For 3 years, I mean, we pulled some numbers that were equal to Monday Night Football. After season 2, season 3,
you're ushering in, right? Food as content. I mean, you're not.
But not standing in a kitchen. Food Network, remember at the time, was not doing competition shows. This is 2007, 8, 9. Food Network had no competition shows. It was chefs standing behind a cutting board, Emerald and all of those. I mean, great chefs, great friends of mine doing great TV. But it was all. I mean, Emerald Live was the most adventurous thing.
Emerald had a lot of ego. I've told this story before on this show. The reason that I did the BAM introduction on Pardon the Interruption is because one night he had come over. It was a charity dinner, and he'd come over at his restaurant. He comes over and he asks us if everything was okay at the table, and I'm an idiot, and so the person I was with, she had asked for a vegan dish that hadn't come out yet, and I just said, well, and he didn't like it so much. I'd insulted the great chef, and so.
Oh my gosh, some of the stuff that we do. He is a wonderful human being and an amazing parent. And an amazingly...
I'm just saying he took his chefing...
I do it all the time.
It was my mistake.
It wasn't
I'm not
your
saying
mistake.
he's an asshole. I'm just saying that for years I did BAM on television to make fun of him because I thought it was wrong.
I didn't take it that way. We get caught up in the night. Like, I do that stuff all the time. When people come up to me and they say, oh, well, this is actually... I met you 4 or 5 years ago. My lips to God's ears, I will oftentimes say to them, was I nice or was I a jerk? Because sometimes in the moment, people have said to me their version of, well, this dish didn't come out, or my sea bass is cold,
right? And they've insulted insulted me. James Beard,
and I'm like,
award-winning. Yes.
Don't short me. Four of them.
You've made him nice. You've made somebody nice food, and their response is, could have used some more garlic.
Of course, which is why. I'm a nice Jewish boy from New York City. I would do in restaurants. I would always do a second Seder in them. I love cooking my grandmother's Seder menu, and because it's traditionally a really dead night in the restaurant business, and I realize it's the toughest crowd in the world because no one's chicken soup, even if mine is twice as good as your grandma's, is better than your grandma's because it's what you grew up on, even if it's dishwater. So I realized I was competing. I would go table touching. How is everything? It's okay. And that's what you would hear because everyone's like, well, my grandmother would always put carrots in her soup. Yeah. And I'm like, well, there are carrots in the broth. We strain them out, and then we wanted to do something a little. And I realized, oh my God, it's not working. It's one of the reasons I think that Tony wound up just cooking for friends and family and sort of never went back into that space because you leave yourself open for too much other stuff. It's kind of safer to be on TV.
What was your relationship with Anthony?
We became really good friends.
Were you competitive, though? I would imagine.
Of course, 100%. The first couple of years, 100%. As a matter of fact, I'm always reminded of it because we had our big sort of friendship breakthrough where it kind of went to a much better level down here the first year he ever did South Beach, which I had been doing for a while, where he asked me to come out during his demo, which was basically he did this wonder wheel thing where he spun this wheel and, he would answer questions from the audience depending on what was going on this wheel, and some other things were going on. And I came out and he put his arm around me and said publicly how much he admired what I did, because we told the same stories and we loved the same things, and we were, sons from different mothers, brothers from different mothers. But he was amazed, and he made a very funny joke about it. He said, I eat the walrus anus, and so do you, except you have to do it sober. He said, which is why, I mad respect for you. And it was really, really interesting because we were on Monday night together. We built that travel channel. I mean, we really did. I mean, I can look back on it now and say that again without having to apologize for it, that, our Monday night allowed them to spread out the content wheel across the other weeknights and bring on a half dozen other shows that did really, really well.
Is there some discomfort for you in having some public pride about all of that? You're allowed to have
100%.
Why?
Oh, my God, because it would be acknowledging that I've actually achieved something.
Okay, but you did. Okay.
I know, but it's like
You're not allowed to have ego about that? You're not allowed to say so?
No, because I'm scared if I get too much ego about where it's going to take me. It's not about acknowledging that,
Isn't there self-love there, thoh? Like
there should be.
And being proud of yourself?
Should be. I'm just not, I'm not, I've feet of clay. I'm still frail in different parts of my life. But the point is, I am okay today when someone said to me, well, you and Bourdain built that channel. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, just say thank you. Just say thank you. Don't argue. Just say thank you. And I finally just said thank you 5-6 years ago. And I've been able to say thank you and acknowledge that we did do that. And then they put us on different nights to kind of stretch the slate, as it were. It's just network strategy for growing audience. It worked. Tony stayed on Monday. I went to Tuesday. I brought my audience over. They could put other shows underneath me and just grow a night. And then they take that person I grew and put them on Wednesday. I mean, so it's a long-term, decade-long strategy to grow the network, which they did. And but we really made that for them. And when they put me on Tuesday night, we became very competitive. And people always, you're the two best shows on Travel Channel, blah, 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 blah. And we sort of had the same content wheel. So our competition started to become who's going to get to Cuba first? Who's going to get to North Korea first? Who's going to get to Syria first? And we would call each other on the phone and kid each other about it, but you'd hang up and you'd be like, we got to get our visas before Bourdain does. Right?
Do you like competition? The reason I asked the question,
I'm insanely competitive.
You are still insanely competitive. I have found that later in life, I have found that is less helpful than it used to be.
Much less helpful. But I mean, even if we're playing darts, people say to me, "What kind of sports do you like to play?" And I always say anything where I can keep score, because even if you beat me 90-60. I'm like, okay, there's a benchmark. Next time you'll beat me 90-70. The next time it's going to be a toss-up, right? I'm going to practice. I'm going to figure it out. And it's what I love. It's what I love about life are those little competitions and scorekeeping. However, I can go into a dangerous place with it where it is much less helpful.
I was just going to ask you whether moderation is a governor in any of these places, because it sounds
100%.
Like in the places that you jump in, you just jump totally in.
I got to clamp it on there and realize that I don't have to just keep pushing. But
the reason I asked about Bourdain and competition is, was your relationship able to get into the place where you and he would talk about the deepest of the stuff
100%.
So that you would have a unique access?
100%. At a certain point after that South Beach thing, we got together. We got together with our kids. We got to know each other a lot better. We were able to talk about the issues that we were having in life, as opposed to just our work or you just go to that next level of relationship with somebody. And it was and in fact, the very last time I saw him was down here at South Beach Wine and Food Festival, the year that he killed himself. And, I was working when that happened, and it was a very, very, very difficult day, a very tragic day. But I was able, because we were close friends, I was able, with dignity for him, to address, and because of my own experience with my own mental health issues, to talk about an aspect of his life that other people could not address because they did not have suicide as a event in their own life. As someone who is what's the best way to describe it? I'm not recovering from it. It is an act that is no longer an issue for me. But as someone who had those feelings and acted on them and tried to take his own life, I think I had an understanding of what was going on there that other people didn't. So
the question I was asking you, if you also had an access to what kind of pain he was in, the two things,
yes and no.
so that you're
yes and no. Yes and no. I heard things come out. I mean, we all hear things come out of friends' mouths where we're like, "You really believe that? What? I mean, that's not cool, bro." And there were aspects of life and relationship that he would express joy or concern about, where you remember I talked before about staying in the center of the lane and not hitting the guardrails, where you see a friend hitting guardrails, but I didn't put it all together. And I hate to should on myself, but I guess a better way to say it is you would think with my background and what I've experienced in my own life that I would have been more aware of the pain that he was in, because nobody goes around broadcasting it. We all have that TV commercial idea of depression where the sad music goes on, the camera dims, maybe it goes to black and white. And, that's not how life works. That's not how life works. And that's not how depression manifests itself all the time. It's not like the TV commercial. And I am so repulsed by it. And it makes me so fucking angry to see it, that commercial after commercial has the face of suicide depression is a 20-something-year-old woman sitting on the edge of a made bed, head down, with sad music playing, because that's not how it manifests itself. That's how a commercial will symbolize it in an effort to get more people to buy that drug, right? Which is really hospitals and doctors. I mean, some people, watch a commercial and go to a doctor and say, "Can I get this medicine?" But very few. You're really trying to sell to a very small audience, but they're going to buy in very large numbers.
You're enraged by the manipulation of mental health.
The portrayal of it, which is why I love saying, I have all of these issues and I'm a suicide survivor, and look at me, but you're so happy and successful. I'm like, yes, you can be both. And by the way, I'm in recovery. I am active in my recovery. That's why I'm happy and productive, and it's why I'm joyous and free. And the minute I cease to be active in my own recovery, I give up that joyfulness and that freedom. But with Tony, when he would tell me about the new relationship with the woman, or the feeling of not being there for his daughter, or issues in his relationship with his daughter's mother, and both when they were married and not, there are, looking back at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that there we go. That was something that I, as a friend, I realized that there were so many gifts. One of the things that I have to practice is trying to find something that justifies sadness in life when there's something like that. And it took me years to remember that what I need to be talking about when people ask me about Tony's death is not fetishizing it. It's not telling stories, oh, look at me, I was a friend of his, and he was the most magnetic person I've ever met in my life. I mean, he is worshipped, and rightfully so, in a way that is reserved only for our greatest of people in our culture, and very deservedly so. However, I have to also remember that rather than fetishizing that and talking about it in a way that makes me look good, I need to take the messages of of what that experience taught me to help other people. And there are so many things in there. You asked before when we started this conversation about the things that motivate me to be more open and more revealing about my life. It's not only because I don't want to go back to that really dark place where I was when I tried to take my own life, but it's also because I can use those things to help other people. And, I mentioned that an hour ago when we were talking, but it's really underscored when we talk about things like Tony's death, which, by the way, is one of the things we will look at. It's all those suicides. Remember, we will never know. I mean, Robin Williams, Philip Seymour Hoffman, how many actors? Heath Ledger, right? Discovered with drugs by his bed, right? Matthew Perry, were those acts of people taking their own lives? For someone like me, they are, because those people knew the behaviors, right, could lead to jails, institutions, and death. Knew it. Were they doing it consciously? We will never know, right? Those people died alone. Whitney Houston, same thing. Was it an attempt? Was she trying to take her own life? Or was it just simply an overdose? She happened to be in the bathtub. We will never know. But those are things that, and I'm specifically mentioning public people because when I'm talking to other people, I can use that because it's a common reference point. Again, not fetishizing, trying to use it to help other people, to point out that we don't know what's going on. And in those moments when you're alone, it is reaching out and asking for help rather than keeping all those things stuffed down that's going to wind up saving lives.
Thank you for the work that you do. I am sure that many people will find your honesty helpful. So thank you, as always, for being as open as you are with the things that you're open about.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate the platform to be able to talk about it. I truly believe that the more sunshine that we throw in all this stuff, the fewer problems we're going to have in this area, and that society has taught us that looking good is something to be prioritized, when in fact, I think being vulnerable is what should be prioritized. We need to make being vulnerable something that is a regular part of our lives.
Look, I've got to look at this. I spent all of this on tissues just so that vulnerability can be showcased.
That's
here.
Exactly right. And I didn't use a one
Not
of them.
Not a one. Useless. The whole thing was useless. Didn't get what I craved the most.